Hi, Deanie. Hi, Ernie.
I'm so funny. We just returned from California.
Oh, that's amazing.
And lo and behold, our next big trip is in April. Yeah, we don't do that to that trip.
Where are you going in April?
Japan.
I'm actually
Oh,
trying to go in like June.
Awesome.
Are you going with the train?
We're going this year
With-
with the bicycle trip.
Oh, well, okay, forget
So
that.
we
I'm
go
not gonna
on
do
a
that.
ship, on a small ship
Uh-huh.
around to different ports, and we get off and ride our bikes and then come back and eat more food and, you know.
Yeah.
You're taking your
own bicycle?
We're exploring. We do have cases to take our bikes with us, but it was wondering if we could rent bikes and not do that.
Yeah.
But it's a 2-week trip, so
yeah.
maybe it's too expensive to rent bikes for 2 weeks.
I don't know. I don't think renting bikes are that.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
Well, what about the, like, if you're on the ship, does the ship provide it? Or
No,
No, oh,
yeah, but we're porting at different places in the bicycle shops.
oh,
So, and I think everybody will just have their bikes with them on the ship.
oh, okay.
Because you're supposed, I think most people just bring their own.
Going on a cruise, a Jewish heritage cruise next.
Hello.
And I think
Somebody sitting here?
river
Nope,
cruise
you are.
ships, I think they take bikes with them because you can buy.
I
them.
bifurcated,
Norma-
because I was standing and sitting at the same.
So it's the Amma water.
How is she feeling?
But
Oh,
but
tired.
it's Jewish singles.
Yeah,
cruise
she's
have
okay.
them.
Okay.
Amazing journey, some of a Jewish heritage cruise. I think they have 2 cabins. left.
She
This one is normally
wanted to be
singles,
here,
this
but
particular cruise.
she chose to stay at home.
I don't blame her.
And it's suited
It's
for
a
the-
requirement.
Because I've looked into
You know
it. and
that-
so They actually do, they're.
All my waking time,
And
I'm
like they specialize in going to like the Jewish
thinking about the.
areas of it. So you don't necessarily have to be a Jewish single. It's
It-
basically.
It's very different, yeah.
Your specific.
Huh?
You know, if you want 80 at the end of the chapter, the end of the chapter. So,
What, yeah,
I know, it's showing, you know, but when you want 80.
oh, we're talking about a book club that we're part of on Wednesday nights.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah. One more chapter. I know we-
with one more chapter.
Is it, we really said?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's not the Papa Road group.
It was,
It was. One that,
but they've now
Renee is
folded
doing.
into, right, they folded into the synagogue.
It's announced in the.
Yeah, we just started announcing it.
No, this is the ethics thing.
Are we doing just the 4th chapter, or are we doing?
Oh,
the-
that's just-
I was thinking we would do an event. Oh, no. Right, this is not her book club. Does this mean, wait, does this mean we're not going to Japan? Probably in the boardroom.
So
That'll be up to, I would like to.
to this, so it'll be just.
Oh, no, that's a separate book club. The
Oh.
Thursday night book club is. separate. I don't know the history of this book club. I know that it was outside of the synagogue and now it's inside the synagogue.
Yeah, they read more clean.
So what?
I hear he's a good author. So,
So you meet every week, but you don't have the, I mean, it's all on Zoom.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
for now.
Please stay on Zoom, Rabbi. I can't drive at dark at night in the dark.
Well,
Neither can I.
at worst, we would do hybrid. So,
Okay. And well, that's what you're doing right now is a hybrid.
Right, exactly.
Well, thank you. Last night was a very enjoyable class. I'm sorry I was a little bit late, but I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I
can-
had too much to drink. When I got on the table and I started dancing, I think that was what it was. I do apologize for that.
Well, you touched a chord because it did continue for a little while after you left.
Hello. Are you here for the book club?
It's the board.
In the boardroom.
Hi, Jeannie. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Debbie.
Right. Deanie and Kathy are on, and Debbie are on Zoom so far.
Okay. They're there. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I heard your voice, Miguel. Hi.
Hey.
See how the hybrid thing works.
Oh,
it's fine.
It works.
Yeah, it's fine because we have a nice microphone, so we can hear them talk.
Good.
We're just going to wait another 2 minutes and then we'll start, but
This isn't one that's like it's a different topic.
Yeah.
So it's okay then.
it's a different topic every week. It's kind of like a soap opera. You can come in 6 months later and we're still talking. the same stuff.
And that was last night.
That's true.
Bring our own cases
Yes,
of Jewish law.
How are we gonna
And we're
find
gonna
those?
be like a
It's not.
bean.
topics,
Oh,
topics,
it's
not specific cases.
the law, right? It's-
So far, it's been ethics and law so
Oh,
far, but we have two requests so far. One is to study Lashon Hara, which is evil tongue. And the other is to study. What's the other one? Tzedakah.
I want to eventually talk about in vitro fertilization.
No, we can't do that.
No?
No, because that's what we're doing today.
Oh,
Now it's just like reading this and it's like, oh, this is gonna be interesting,
And where it leads to.
yes.
So it's
good.
not really in vitro, but we're going to touch on all of this.
For a purpose other than.
Hello, Emily.
Example, read the first paragraph and that would explain it, so.
Right.
Hi, John.
Okay, let's start.
Oh,
So-
I see. Oh, wow. Well,
Okay, so let me-
illegal in Texas.
Yeah, let me read. Well, here we go. I'm going to read the first paragraph because we're going to end up far afield of where the first paragraph is. And so this is the issue. These are real issues. These actually happen. A woman wishes to conceive and then abort her fetus in order to transplant its tissues to her father, who suffers from Parkinson's disease. Lest you should think, by the way, that this is a made-up case. I know at least 2 cases of exactly this. The procedure is expected to alleviate the ailing man's pain and extend his life expectancy. Is this procedure permissible? Is there a distinction between the first and second trimesters of pregnancy? Does it make a difference if the pregnancy is unintentional? Questions so far?
I think it's a great topic. Thank you.
The last sentence,
I know such a case.
I mean, the purpose,
Yes.
the first sentence, basically.
So, Rabbi, I have a question.
Right, now it's a different question.
different
That's
question.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, are there questions from the Zoomers?
Yeah, so what trimester is the person in when they're wanting to do this?
Yes,
Well, it sounds like it was even before she even got pregnant. That's what it said.
Right.
I mean.
right.
this is-
She has come,
It's at the very Parkinson's issue and.
we are dealing with a lot of issues right now.
Yes,
So the
there's many
specific
to
issue,
unpack it.
right,
Yeah.
the specific issue that was brought to the Beit Din, to the rabbinic court, is that a woman's father has Parkinson's and it is it really is out of control. So what they're thinking of is if they can get stem cells from a fetus that she then has, if she gets pregnant, they can take the stem cells and then she can abort the fetus. So
Available without her.
Unclear.
Yeah,
We don't know. This is,
For the purpose of this case, yeah.
well, assume the answer. Because stem cells are hard to
They're hard to-
produce.
right.
and it usually-
and they're in high
the
demand.
embryos. I would have changed the name to embryo.
Well, this is, I'm quoting from the
thing,
transcripts.
From the transcripts.
This case is 20 years old.
And this is strictly.
Wow, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Strictly talking Jewish law.
Yeah. This is from an Israeli court. So it's not American. So I would have thought this was specious, excuse me, until, yes, Debbie.
I wanted to speak up because I happen to have multiple sclerosis and was part of a multiple sclerosis program where we were delving into stem cells and also with Hadassah. The legalized stem cells for research and therapy are adult stem cells. They are not embryonic stem cells. I know a lot of people have been conceiving to think that they can use the baby stem cells, but for therapeutic purposes, they're adult stem cells. So that's not saying anything about what your question is, whether this is legal or not, but it's a misconception of the person who's doing this. That's the only reason I was speaking up about it.
Remember,
Emily's a nurse, so she might know things I don't.
right, but remember, this case is 20 years
This
old.
is before they figured out how to
So-
get stem cells from adult,
Right.
from other adult cells. The
Right.
only way to do it was
And-
from-
Right, and there are similar cases where we have, where so for instance, I know of one specific case from my congregation where a couple got pregnant because the husband had leukemia and they were having the child, or they were having the fetus, so that they could get some type of donation of either bone marrow from the child, and that was why the child was eventually born, so that it could be a donor.
But it wasn't terminating the pregnancy.
But there was a question of whether they could terminate the pregnancy. That because did they extract it from the fetus, or did the child have to be born? The child had to be born.
Right.
So, but they were asking. Yeah.
Rabbi, you have taught us that intention doesn't matter. What matters is what you do. This is only at the intention stage. So I'm not sure that I can say anything about it, but there is one thing. 20 years ago, intrauterine surgery was pretty well developed.
Yes,
They
it was.
could open the abdomen, get inside the uterus, take from the bone marrow of the,
Right.
so
But
we
in-
don't need to destroy these babies.
They don't want the baby. In this case, they did not want the
Oh,
baby.
they don't want the
Yes.
baby.
They just want the fetus.
Okay.
No
Just
way.
want the parts, yeah.
I don't think.
They just want the stem cells. They don't even want the fetus. They just want the stem cells.
If they can harvest the stem cells, they would abort the fetus.
I think that.
Well, the question is whether Jewish law allows it, whether it's wrong or right. And anyone who knows law is not about right and wrong. Law is about legal and illegal.
Right.
So,
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the status of, what is, we'll say a status of an embryo or a fetus.
Well, that's-
Is
Right.
it a person? And I can't remember what we discussed
think that's right.
previous.
well, and that's where we're going to go with.
Okay.
So Debbie, if you are talking, you are on mute.
No, I just spoke up and said what I said the other day, the first breath.
Okay. Yeah.
Rabbi, just as a footnote or a note to the margin, the first thing that I thought about when we read this paragraph is the Nazi experiment in which Jews were killed to try to figure out why people died when they were in freezing water.
Mhm.
And the background is that the Royal Air Force was shooting down the Luftwaffe, and the people were parachuting out into the North Sea.
How long could they live? Right.
How long could they live? So it is one of the most horrible experiments that
Uh-huh.
they conducted. And the library at used to be Randolph Air Force Base, was
Mhm.
named after one of the people. They didn't know that he was a Nazi criminal, Hubertus Struckhold.
Right, and if you want, at some point, we can look into the legality in Jewish law of whether we can use the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Nazi experimentation, the results in modern medicine,
Yes,
because that is a big issue in,
That's a different.
now we have three, that's a
Oh, yeah.
different topic. Okay,
Isn't stem cell part of the pikuach nefesh though?
well, there's and there, as you said, there's a lot to unpack here. You know, are we saving a life? Is Parkinson's life-threatening at this stage? And these are, and as you'll see, one of the reasons I chose this is not for this specific issue as much as the issues that it brings up. And
This, it doesn't say that he was specifically was going to save his life.
Well, it is going to
Yeah.
extend his life,
Extend-
well,
but that's
extend.
it's quality of
It's-
life,
I mean,
quality.
no, but it said extend his life
Right.
expectancy. So saving his life, saying, okay, if you do nothing, he's gonna live 5 years. But if we do something, he may live 10 or 15 years. Isn't that, you know? we're
And that's
saving
what we
his
have
life
to,
for-
and that's what we have to
Ascertain.
ascertain. So
Yeah.
Debbie, would you begin reading the two basic problems?
Okay, excuse me. There are two basic problems regarding this question. Is it permissible to conceive for the purpose other than reproduction? Is it permissible to terminate a pregnancy for an important purpose, such as the mitzvah of honoring your parents?
So notice how they've categorized this. There are
Yeah.
two, and remember, we always put it into categories. We have to put it into categories because once it's in a category, we know how to handle it. The first is, can you get pregnant? It is a mitzvah to get pregnant and to give birth. It's called being fruitful and multiply. Is it permissible to get pregnant without the intention? And here's where intention may or may not come into play. Is it permissible to get pregnant without wanting to reproduce? Oh, this is Orthodox. We're dealing
Well,
straight Orthodox.
Because if saving a life is important, it's one of those things of, I know, hating for it, but it's sort of like, will the act of conceiving for a purpose other, if the act of conceiving is to help save a lot of lives? You know,
Mhm.
so, you know, that's something where it's like,
Yeah,
with
it's-
that.
That's
That's
part
the
of it as
reason.
well, right? So, but again, coming back to it, the first question is, can you conceive without intending to give birth? And the second is, if you are terminating a pregnancy in order to do a mitzvah, can you do that?
you're breaking.
All right, right. So and the old issue of, and it's a major issue, is it possible to do a mitzvah even though you're doing it
Yeah.
through sin? Can you do a mitzvah? The assumption, and that's making an assumption that abortion is sinful, which we're not exactly sure yet in Jewish law.
Rabbi, I have a question about this. While their purpose in conception is to be able to harvest the stem cells, it's also to extend the life of the father, which is a mitzvah. The determination is, in their thoughts, a mitzvah, but their wish to conceive is also a mitzvah.
It is not a mitzvah to extend the life of a person. And
It's
that,
not. Okay. I did not know that.
well, you know, a mitzvah can mean different things, but in Jewish legal terms, a mitzvah is a commandment. I am not required to extend your life if I have that option.
But isn't that also honoring your parents?
Honoring your parents is a mitzvah.
Yes. To do
Extending-
by-
Right, but extending a person's life is not. If it is my parent and I extend their life, then I'm honoring them, but it's not, but the actual act of extending is not
So you
the
could-
mitzvah.
So here, when it's, if it was like, oh, I'm conceiving to help my friend, would not be, you wouldn't even consider that as part of the law because you're not honoring your parents. But
Correct.
the fact
Mhm.
that we're making it
That
so
it's
that
with a
it's
parent.
for your
Yes.
parent. It can't be for
Right.
your child, it can't
Right.
be for a
But-
friend.
But Rabbi,
Well,
that
hold on,
brings,
Kathy. Deanie, I think Kathy had her hand up first.
Okay, thanks. I remember reading about a Jewish woman doctor who in the concentration camps would terminate women's pregnancies so that they would not be killed.
Right.
So even though she did not want to do that, she felt like it was necessary to save their lives.
And that was allowed.
Was that allowed?
Well, in the Holocaust, the
You
Jewish
didn't-
law became very different. The answer from the rabbis, I'm familiar with the case. The answer from the rabbis was because, and it's different in Judaism. In Christianity, the fetus and the mother are on equal terms.
Yes.
In Judaism, the fetus is not equal to the mother. And if the, and
Mhm.
we talked
Yes.
about this last week,
Yes, yeah,
that if the fetus
Right.
is injuring the mother's life,
it's okay.
it's called a rodef, which means someone who is pursuing you for harm. And so
Mhm.
therefore you are allowed to terminate the fetus in
Right.
order to save the mother. In the
Right.
concentration camps, because being pregnant would lead to the mother's death, yes, what she was doing at that point was considered a mitzvah. So,
And that's also,
I'm sorry? Okay, but Deanie goes first. Deanie, you.
yes, it occurs to me that it brings up the question, does one die with Parkinson's disease or of Parkinson's disease? I mean, does it make a difference? Do you die of Parkinson's disease or with Parkinson's disease?
Yeah, I think it depends on I'm not a doctor, but it does depend on the individual
But
case.
for this law, isn't that kind of moot? It isn't.
Yeah,
the
but
fact
that
you-
isn't the
it's not
mitzvah
that
you're
doing it
dealing with.
Because you're saving
Right.
a life, you're honoring your parents
yeah,
by
that's the mitzvah
helping
we're
them,
dealing
by
with.
helping their quality of life.
It's also sort of not your.
Is it gonna make a difference?
Well, notice how they elided around that, what you were saying just before. They elided around it. Look at, they're not talking about Parkinson's as being fatal. They're talking about, and in fact, they have disregarded Parkinson's in the questions. They have, the questions that they've asked is, can you conceive without intent on reproduction? And can you terminate a pregnancy if you are performing the mitzvah of honoring your parents? So they're not even talking about saving a life here. Because the life is not an imminent danger.
But you know, when you look at the commandment, honor thy father and mother, there are so many, you know, that's very ambiguous and broad. How do you
Right.
demonstrate honoring your
Mhm.
mother or father?
There you go.
Oh, that is just such a big.
It's an
question.
umbrella.
It's a
Right.
huge
The
umbrella.
third commandment is thou shalt be fruitful and multiply.
Yes.
Okay, so if we're going by the Orthodox perspective. okay,
Yes, I'm a little lost here.
Do you need directions? You're in San Antonio.
What's the relation between termination and honoring your parents?
Hold on, because Susan was talking, so let's
Sorry.
that, and then we'll make it even worse for you.
Okay.
Even within Orthodox Judaism, there are reasons that are acceptable to practice birth control. Life is in danger, or depending on what the rabbi wants the question, it could be anything else. So now we're saying, well, which mitzvah is more important? Reproducing and multiplying or honoring your parents? And
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't think they get grades
But
or brownie points for having debit and
from the laws, from Jewish law, your opinion and my opinion is
but
a,
even in Jewish law,
So-
you say
so let me,
it's mitzvah against mitzvah.
so let me throw a monkey wrench into the machinery. All right, are you all sitting down?
Yep.
Yeah. Being fruitful and multiplying is a mitzvah. The mitzvah for the man, not the woman.
Huh. Oh, my goodness.
Okay?
Well,
Now, the No, 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 no,
Give him a
no,
chance.
no, 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 I'm letting it sink in.
Women to give birth.
No, it has nothing to do with this.
Be your property.
No, it has nothing to do with that.
But I wish. I
You've got to
know
read
what
your
I was-
Torah, right? Which?
What, propagating the man's heritage and.
No,
you
it,
know,
remember, we're talking law. We're not
Okay.
talking opinion. When God says, be fruitful and multiply, Eve has not been created yet.
Um,
God is only talking to Adam because Eve isn't there. So the rabbinic, and this is the rabbinic interpretation, is that it is not a mitzvah on the woman. Because it is not a mitzvah on the woman, a woman
has
is
more
allowed
choices.
to, yes, a woman is allowed to use birth control, the man is not. A woman, and there are other things as well,
You're
which if
ribbing
I,
me.
Well, she can't get
and she, but she's allowed to say no.
Yeah,
A
so that's the
woman,
well purpose. She can
Yeah.
say no. Yeah.
Well, if
So-
you have to say no, then it's no longer what the woman wishes. The issue becomes, is it the man? You know where I'm headed, right?
I know where you're heading, but they're ignoring it.
Yeah, ignoring it because in this case, the man is not attempting to fulfill that mitzvah.
Right.
Right.
He
Yes.
is not, he doesn't have an intent to reproduce.
And it's the woman's decision. So because the woman is not required to reproduce,
She doesn't have to, so the answer is she
so
can.
can she get
Yes.
pregnant without the intention of reproduction?
Yes.
That, I told you it was a monkey wrench.
But once she's pregnant, there
Well,
may
that's a
be
different
something
story.
That's the
different
problem.
That's also.
That's all. Okay, Ron, you said you were lost. How lost?
Well, I'm looking at number 2. About terminating a pregnancy and honoring your parents. I don't see the relationship.
Right, what they're doing is if you look at the first paragraph, let me read it again because that grounds us. A woman wishes to conceive. Whoops. A woman wishes
Okay.
to conceive and then abort her fetus in
Mhm.
order to transplant its tissues to her father, who suffers
Oh,
from this disease.
okay. I got it.
Want the fetus for the stem cells. So the way in which this is being interpreted or to be for the decision to be made is it permissible for a woman to terminate a pregnancy since it is not a mitzvah for her to become pregnant in order to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring her parents? And that makes this extremely complicated.
Oh,
And how far is she with her pregnancy?
Well,
doesn't matter.
she's not pregnant yet.
Yeah.
She's not pregnant.
She's not pregnant.
Not very far.
Okay.
Would she? That's right. And
Yes.
then we will deal with that. Phil, your hand is up.
So this is a fascinating case. I think that, first of all, I think it's fairly brilliant how the problem is distilled to those 2 basic questions. And
Notice
we
you did not
spent
say
the-
the teacher was being brilliant.
and we've,
Brilliant. And
we
Phil,
spent the first 10 or 15 minutes of our discussion trying to get around answering those 2 questions.
and you know,
which
Phil, my
really
mother,
is what we're being asked.
my
I
mother
think-
thought I was brilliant, which is why she called me son.
There you go. I think that we've answered the first question. I think the second question, and the question is, if you forget the second part of the first question for an important purpose, is it permissible to terminate a pregnancy? And, they're saying, to honor your parents, to, for whatever reason, is it permissible? And that gets back to some of the issues we discussed in terms of abortion. And when is the fetus alive? And I happen to see the next line about a law about a 40-day-old fetus.
Right, which is where we're
And
going.
so that's interesting, but that's really what it's coming down to, it looks like.
Maybe, Miguel.
Yes, two things quickly, I hope. There is an article in the ethics literature which is called The Duty to Prolong Life,
Mhm.
a duty without roots in classical antiquity. It is really very recently, it's after the Reformation that prolonging a life became an obligation for physicians. And the other thing is, I don't know what they mean by the ailing man's pain. Is it moral pain? Like I can't go to the supermarket anymore because I'm shaking, or is it physical pain? My grandmother, my mother's mother died from with Parkinson's. She never complained of pain. She complained of lack of ability to move the way she wanted
So
to.
with the
So-
ethics you're describing, was that ethics, medical ethics versus?
I can tell you as somebody who takes care of these people and has for many years, that a subset does indeed have significant debilitating pain directly related to their spasticity and other factors related to the Parkinson's. Not all of them, but some can have.
The difference
I have or with.
difference is
It's
that
only very recent.
that in Jewish ethics, prolonging life is not a mitzvah, nor is it required. And we deal with this under the issue of euthanasia, which is, in general, in Jewish law, you are allowed to allow someone to pass away, to die, and you do not have to take heroic measures to prolong their life. But if you take heroic measures, you cannot take them away. So for instance, in one of the issues, in one of the cases that I dealt with, a woman had, her father was in his late 90s. He was almost they could communicate with him, but he could not digest. They wanted to put a feeding tube in. And one of the things I said to her was, she had to realize that in Jewish law, because that's what she was asking, if you put the feeding tube in, you can't take it out. And actually you can take it out if by taking out that feeding tube, they are not going to die within a certain amount of time. When you put someone on a respirator, if you know by taking them off the respirator, they're going to die within minutes, then according to Jewish law, you can't do that. But I do know that especially in a Catholic hospital, which is where he was, if you put in a feeding tube, it was in this hospital, I knew that there was an ethical issue about removing it.
Sure.
And so what ended up happening is I suggested that she actually ask her father if he wanted a feeding tube. And she asked him, and they said, this is what he's going to need. And he actually died that night.
Because
He didn't want the feeding tube. So Kathy, your hand was up.
I was looking at the last paragraph there about a pregnant mother does not have ownership rights of the fetus growing inside of her. So it sounds like she doesn't have the right to, to decide what to do with the fetus's tissues.
And I included that in there only because this is not the law. This is part of the discussion.
Opinion, right.
It's an opinion that's in the Talmud, but it ends up not being the law. So let's at least move to the next paragraph, which will help us as we go forward, which is the law, and this is the law, that a fetus that is less than 40 days old is considered merely water. In other words, it has no legal status whatsoever. So if we're talking about a fetus that's under 40 days old, then the fetus has no status. But over 40 days old, it has legal status depending on who's dealing with the opinion. Okay, I think there was another hand up.
So they're.
Yeah. Okay, so the fetus is a living, according to Igrot Moshe, which is a modern law compendium, the fetus is a living creature and abortion is therefore forbidden, even if the child is a result of a forbidden union. So one of the issues that's brought forward is, what if the child is a mamzer? And that doesn't mean that they're a nasty kid. Mamzer that, no, not even that. A
Right.
mamzer is a technical term for my no, it's not my brother. So he's a mamzer, but that's a different category. A mamzer is the product of a forbidden union. In other words, if a woman is pregnant through incest, a woman is pregnant through a forbidden marriage,
Or rape.
a rape, right? Then, well, no, a child of rape is not considered a mamzer.
Really? Well, it
Right,
makes sense.
because it's not a forbidden union. In
Yeah,
other
'cause
words,
incest is like two
right,
very related.
incest is forbidden from the Torah.
Right.
All right, rape is a sin and there is punishment for it, but you don't punish the child necessarily. That doesn't mean that abortion is not acceptable in Jewish law for that, but it means that you don't abort for that reason, because they're a mamzer. Now, a mamzer, according to Jewish law, well, I think we went over this, but let me at least bring it up again. If I were asking you as liberal Jews, or you were asking me as a liberal rabbi, what is the greatest challenge that affects Jewish community today? We would talk about assimilation. We would talk about intermarriage. We would talk about the lack of continuity. If we were all Orthodox, and you were to ask an Orthodox knowledgeable group, what is the biggest challenge to Judaism today? They would say mamzers.
Oh, mamzer.
So, for instance, if a Jewish woman gets a divorce, a secular divorce, and does not get a get, and then she remarries, the child of the second marriage is a mamzer.
But he's got a Jewish mother, so he's Jewish.
Yes, but a mamzer is not allowed to marry a Jew. A mamzer can only marry another mamzer. They are not considered part of the Jewish community. So the problem is, from an Orthodox point of view, that if you have a reform, if an Orthodox Jew gets engaged to a Reform Jew, they are now investigating the genealogy of the Reform person's parents
Oh, my goodness.
to make sure that there is no secular divorce without a get. Because if there is, they can't get married. And they can never get married. There is no remedy for being a mamzer. So that's and it's something we don't talk about, or the Orthodox don't talk about. Right.
That's what we're going
Right.
Oh, I mean, oh, it's a whole different, I don't want to get off.
Now, there's no such thing as off topic. No, right, not in this room.
Yeah, I mean, if two people are married by a Reform rabbi and they get a secular divorce and don't get a get.
Funny you should bring that up. Is anyone familiar with what's going on in Israel right now?
Oh, yeah.
With the possible
New.
with the new coalition and the new laws that the ultra-Orthodox are bringing forward. This actually does touch on this. Okay. In the 1960s, Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was the head of the Orthodox community, issued a ruling, issued a ruling that marriages performed by Reform and conservative rabbis were not valid marriages. No, ever.
Oh, wow.
My brother.
That's modern.
Modern Orthodox. Was his smicha valid? Of course. Now, the reason it is believed that Rabbi Soloveitchik, and by the way, Orthodoxy did not accept it. It's one of the few things that he said, that he pronounced, that no one was willing to accept. Now, wait for it. This gets much more convoluted. The reason it is believed that Soloveitchik issued that ruling was to prevent mamzers. Because
those are more likely to.
If he invalidated all marriages done by liberal rabbis, then no gets were required. And if no gets were required, then there's no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Problem was that the liberal rabbinate went absolutely,
Gaga over that, I'm sure.
I'm not sure gaga is the right word.
Gaga.
And
Sugar.
it went crazy because it invalidated who they were,
Right.
which if they had just let it alone would have helped the concept of mamzerut and might have eradicated it. But the Orthodox didn't like it either. Now, what's going on in Israel is if this new coalition gets its way and the ultra-Orthodox get their way with Netanyahu, they have now stated that Reform and conservative Jews in Israel are not Jewish, basically.
So that means if they go with this with the law that the Jewish law of return, that means that, well, being a conservative Jew, I
No,
wouldn't be. able
law
to
of return is different. Law of return is secular.
Oh, it's secular.
In the secular government of Israel, the law of return
Okay.
applies, but you cannot be considered Jewish for citizenship until the end of your 5 year. The rabbinut will not consider you Jewish.
Oh,
But you can be a Jewish mamzer.
But
Right,
you can
well,
never
there are a lot of
marry-
moms who are Jewish,
You never marry-
but you can never marry into a Jewish family. Period, unless they're
Wow.
unless it's a momzer. So this is really heavy stuff going on. It's like when my oldest daughter married into what was basically a Haredi family, my oldest daughter did, there was a lot of genealogy going on because I was a conservative rabbi. So I was
Suspect.
very suspect.
That explains a lot of things.
Yes, and my daughter didn't do anything to alleviate. She had more fun with them. She stoked the fires.
She knew what she was
She knew what she was doing. She drove them crazy. Which is, by the way, as a lesson, if you have a son, never alienate his fiancée. They never forget. My daughters are. They have long memories. So I digress. So here we go. What if that child, one of the questions brought up is, what if the fetus would be a mamzer? Are you allowed to abort a fetus if it was from an illegitimate union? And that is one of the questions. Indeed, would it be a mitzvah to abort the fetus because that child is going to be born into a life where they can never be Jewish?
So
Or even
what
just
you're
like-
suggesting to me is that if this lady gets pregnant through sperm donation,
Well,
the baby, the fetus, whatever, is a mamzer?
No, in fact, but you bring up,
Still another.
when you deal with sperm donations, Jewish women are encouraged to make sure that their sperm donors are not Jewish.
Are not
Are
Jewish.
not Jewish.
Not, huh,
Because if they were Jewish, they'd run into the monsters.
Because that's
what's the
now.
reason? What's the reason?
No,
they're not Jewish, it's not a mamzer, but if they're Jewish.
That's
they're
right.
Orthodox,
That's right.
if they're Jewish, then you don't know the identity of the sperm donor,
Ah.
there is a possibility
That it
that
could
they
be.
could be, it could be a forbidden union.
Makes sense.
But if they're not Jewish,
It doesn't matter.
they can't be a mamzer anyway. And
Because they were
the-
never claimed to be.
If this is a Jewish couple coming to the Beit Din, an Orthodox couple, how did we get the mamzer law?
carefully,
Because, yeah, because obviously they must be. They
They're-
were Orthodox. and
Yeah,
that's
they
why
are.
They asked the question, if they're Orthodox. then
Right.
It's not a mamzer.
the court is trying to, right,
But they're just working through
the court is trying to determine under what circumstances there can be an abortion. And if we have determined that there are circumstances under which you can have an abortion, is this qualified? That's all.
That's,
Okay.
Oh, very.
Well, would you rather have them talk football? I mean, come on,
That was 2 rabbis ago.
that's true.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to deal with stem cell research.
Okay.
I haven't even started, Phil, and you're
Oh, I'm
already.
already reading it. We went from water in the last page to now we're talking about, we're going another angle and saying, yeah, if they're only worth water, you can terminate, but.
Right. So Phil, since you're already grepsing, which is a technical term, would you read on the, let's at least figure out what stem cells are. Would you read that paragraph?
Stem cells are special types of cells that have the potential to grow into any cell or tissue in the body, and so can be used to replace cells that are damaged or diseased. Researchers believe the use of stem cells has the potential for curing Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, diabetes, heart disease, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, severe burns, and many more illnesses and injuries, literally allowing the body to heal itself. These amazing cells can come from many sources besides embryos, including umbilical cords and bone marrow, tissues and fat from adult humans. But medical researchers overwhelmingly report that embryonic cells have the greatest potential for curing disease. Their ability to convert into other types of cells is far more potent than that of adult cells. So potential is the key for me.
Right.
In other words, we don't know. It's almost like when we're talking about when we're getting authorization and such, is it experimental or is it standard of care? But that's just an additional footnote.
Okay. So the question is, can you get pregnant for the purpose of harvesting stem cells? And then can you then abort the fetus at any point?
Is there a point in a pregnancy at which the stem cells become viable?
And that.
Because you
right,
have that 40 days.
Right.
So at what point in a pregnancy are the stem cells even viable for harvesting?
So Phil, what is, since you do some work in this area, at what age can a fetus be harvested? At what age can you take the stem cells out of a fetus?
So my understanding or guess, and that's all it is that actually it's the earlier the better, but pretty much any time you can get some, and that's, of course, that's where the umbilical cells come from. It's from the fetus. And so if you can get them in the umbilical cord, at the time of delivery, then you can get them from the fetus, is my, would be my assessment. But certainly the earlier, the easier it is.
Researchers harvest the embryo stem cell at the day 4 or 5 stage.
Right.
This time frame is crucial because it's just after the embryo begins dividing multiple cells within itself, but before those cells begin to differentiate.
Right.
So it's in the 40 days.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay,
figured, because
okay.
at some point, the stem cells.
That's
may
right.
have decided to become skin
Some-
cells,
whatever
heart
they are.
cells.
Abort within the 40 days.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Yes,
sure it
you
was
can.
within those few days, yeah.
You can. So under those circumstances, yes, you can do it within the 40 days, which under Jewish law would be acceptable. Then the question is, can you do it in order to perform them? Can you do the abortion in order, because are you fulfilling the mitzvah of honoring your parents? And is it permissible to conceive for the purpose other than reproduction?
Hey, mess.
Yes.
So we're implying that it's yes and yes, is what we're saying.
Question is, do they allow the second child to come to term? Or do they abort? And the issues that I've dealt with, they have given birth to the child.
Say
Now,
that-
for the purpose of letting the child, of having the child, is also for the purpose of in the event that a transplant is needed or further medical attention is needed, they have the child, which may not be the best reason to have a child. Is it a reason for an abortion?
Rabbi, I'm having problems with the word researchers believe. And I'm thinking, in the
Right.
16th century, the Spaniards found out that the Native Americans of Mexico used a herb called guayac. And they took it to Europe and they believed that it was going to be the treatment for syphilis. So people were painting themselves with guayac and things like that. And every one of them died from syphilis.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of science, is like, you have a theory. That's why they said researchers believe. It's not going to be like researchers say that stem cells
This is
can
the
do
way
it
it is.
until they get the
Yeah.
research and until they have the experiments to prove that, yes, stem cells do cure or to treat Parkinson's disease. But in the meantime, they use belief.
Yes, but is this belief based on a controlled experiment, or I just believe that
Well,
this is?
They're probably working on studies. That's their theory. And you,
Well,
but the thing is, it keeps doing it. You have to have more and more studies. So maybe they've had one study that shows, hey, they tried a stem cell and it did improve it by 5%, but it's only one study and it only had like 2 people. So now you have to have further studies. But in the meantime, then they have one that has 100.
So
But
you're
in the
talking about
meantime,
rational belief. So is this a rational belief?
yes, I think that.
Well, it's certainly not an irrational belief.
Well, but wait a second.
Is it
I mean,
somewhere in
We
between?
just had the fusion.
Yeah,
For years, we've learned the theory. Now they finally
They
it
did show that.
made it so that they got more energy than when they started with from fusion in one experiment. And now, is that going to be definitely the saving grace for
Well, they also
for
don't
the
count
climate issues?
they don't count the energy that was taken to actually produce the laser that produced the energy.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
still not.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But
it's a
we've
good
heard the,
theory.
we've heard the
Yeah.
theory now for many years.
That fusion could provide energy.
But
so they
yeah, but where are we proving it?
so,
Not yet.
so
totally.
if we can borrow,
I want to, I guess
Yeah.
that's a very small sample.
yeah, if we can borrow though from transplantation, from the ethics of transplants, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, is that 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you could not donate your organs according to Jewish law because it was considered desecration of the body. Unless the organ was going right into the body of another person. So if you knew ahead of time that the person who had died was going to have their organ transplanted into another, we're going to have their heart transplanted, you could do it. But otherwise it was not allowed because it was considered desecration. The reason being that research, even though everything went to research, there was the belief that so much was wasted that there was no guarantee that taking that
one
donation. Now, exceptions were made in issues of irises and sometimes of kidneys, because usually those went into bodies. But now, right, every single organ that is donated is used if it's right. Or the research that's done on the organs is so complicated, but so advanced that it is guaranteed that any organ that is donated will go to help someone. So that if we can take that as something that is similar, we may assume at this point that stem cell research is at a point where every single stem cell that's harvested is going to be used in some way to save someone's life.
There are two kinds.
Right, but we
But just in
assume,
general. it'd be
Right.
different.
So back to this particular topic. You know, they talk about creating a fetus outside the uterus, so a
Right.
test tube baby or
Right.
in the lab, as opposed to actually it being created inside the womb. This doesn't, where it says a
Specify.
woman wishes to conceive, that tells me she was intending on
Yeah.
actually getting
In-
impregnated.
Yes,
I don't know
Yes.
why, unless it was 20 years ago.
it was.
They didn't
This was
do the
20 years
lab.
ago.
No,
This
that's
was-
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
20 years ago. maybe
didn't have the
they really didn't
technology.
Have the technology to produce it. So like, if this was today, that would sort of almost solve the issue if they could grow the embryo out. According to Jewish law,
Well,
they could grow it.
so here's the
in the
monkey
lab,
wrench.
right?
Here's the monkey wrench. Once, well, 20 years, 40 years from now, test tube babies will probably be a reality. We can't assume it, but we can
Oh, yeah.
posit. In Judaism, once the fetus, one of the final decisions on abortion is once the fetus is viable outside the womb, it is considered a living entity. So that
even if it's.
if you actually took it outside the womb, it would be a living entity, and therefore it could not be aborted.
So
So
the
now-
40-day rule doesn't apply.
40-day rule, the only reason the 40-day rule applied was because they didn't have the technology back then to understand what it was.
Yeah.
So,
Still a pretty good rule. You know, back, I can recall when 23 weeks, you know, was, you know, if it was a delivery that was earlier than 23 weeks, it was not going to be viable. 23 weeks, again, how many days is that? That's a lot more than 40. So when you're talking about just 40 days, I think that that's a pretty safe bet. You know, 40 days, you're talking about less than 6 weeks. And the heart forms at about 6 weeks. So
right,
I think that that's pretty early.
but there will be a point, we believe, where a conception can take place outside the womb.
Yeah, I think I think at some point in the future, I don't know when, you'll be able to conceive and basically have an artificial womb until
Right.
it's, and then decant. Sort of like, not Animal Farm, not 84, I forgot the other one, but
1984.
was it
No.
1984?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Brave New World.
Yeah.
Brave
Yeah.
New World.
Now you
Right.
can look at the lady Kardashian.
Right,
Well,
but
that's the
coming
deal.
back,
Yeah.
so in these, we have Rabbi Gedalia Dov Schwartz, who's head of the Chicago's Orthodox Religious Court, who said that he's not ready to issue an opinion on the matter, which is ortho speak for, I don't know what's going on. And I'm not going to issue an opinion, which is a very smart thing because I don't have the knowledge. But Moshe Tendler, who is the world authority on medical ethics at Yeshiva University, calls stem cell research the hope of mankind.
So.
Yeah.
You just said a few moments
So,
ago.
if I can interject,
Phil, hold on. Yeah,
okay.
In the middle of that next paragraph, it
Yeah.
says, embryos that remain outside the womb have no chance to become children, and therefore it is a mitzvah to use those embryos for research.
currently,
So.
yes.
So, but that's just what I said a minute ago, if they're viable outside the womb, then they're considered alive.
If at some point they become viable outside the womb,
Because right now, what it
Which
is
they're not.
you have the test tube where it's outside. It could last in the test tube for a while, then it gets implanted in a woman. And at that point,
right,
it leaves. That's why I was saying at some point in the future, I think we'll skip the woman step, but and in which
Right.
case then this will be.
this is a tremendously gray area. And then when the quoting, what you just quoted is Elliot Dorff. Elliot Dorff is a conservative rabbi. And Moshe Tendler is not.
Yeah.
But let me give you an example where Moshe Tendler, as an Orthodox rabbi, and I've used this, we talked about this weeks ago, where it is not true that Orthodox Judaism is always stricter than non-Orthodox Judaism. When Elisa Flato, whom you probably have not heard that name before, but Elisa Flato was killed in a terrorist bomb in Israel. She was from West Orange, New Jersey. And we knew her. She was in one of my daughter's classes. When she was on life support, her father flew over to Israel and was on the phone with Rabbi Tendler. And it was Tendler's decision that all of her organs be harvested. That was the seminal, this was in the 90s. This was when organ transplantation went into the mainstream in Orthodox Judaism, because he said every single organ should be transplanted. And that's when all of a sudden the gates opened. It was a very, very liberal, flexible decision. And he made that decision based on his knowledge that all of these organs would go into other people. But what was even more liberal was that Tendler's decision, they harvested her organs and there were Palestinians who received them.
Ah,
So not only was she saving Jewish lives, she was saving Palestinian lives. And that's how liberal Tendler was. There weren't many conservative rabbis who would have said that at that point.
But
So-
she wasn't pregnant?
No, she wasn't.
Okay.
She wasn't married. She was killed. She was a
Because there are
teenager.
cases in which a woman has been kept, who would have otherwise been disconnected.
Right.
Has been kept alive in order to.
That's right. So
So what was the decision?
the decision on this case is that she could not get pregnant for several reasons. First was, I'm sorry, it was a Beit Din in Israel and it was a seminal decision. Could not get pregnant for several reasons. One was, this was not fulfilling the mitzvah of honoring your parents. First of all, so it didn't fulfill that category. Yes, it was,
wasn't
but that
honoring
doesn't mean that honors them.
Yeah, that wasn't.
So they didn't interpret it as that way. That was the first thing. And the second thing was that it was inappropriate for her to make a decision, even though the fetus has no rights until a certain age. It was inappropriate for her to bring a potential life into being
Existence, yeah.
with the intention, and this is where intention
Yes,
actually counts, with the intention of not letting it be alive. It basically, how the Beit Din ruled was, it smells funny.
now if she had, just curious, here she was asking beforehand. You kind of wonder with the whole like after forgiveness later. Let's say she just happens to find herself pregnant and says, she didn't
Right.
want to be and wants to use it to
Right,
do it. We don't know.
and we don't know. So, Phil, your hand is up.
Yes,
Debbie's is
So-
first.
so for me,
Fred.
the issue goes into potential. We're not there yet. Yes, embryonic pluripotent stem cells represent tremendous potential, whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but it's not now. We can't cure all these diseases from spinal cord injury to Alzheimer's to cancer using them now or tomorrow or in 6 months. We're talking about something that's in the future. I can recall when I did research in Hopkins in neuropathology in 1984 with the goal of regenerating the optic nerve. And shortly after, a guy named Aguayo did a procedure where he was able to regenerate a little bit of one nerve. We're not there yet. That doesn't mean we won't be, but we are talking about potential and we don't know when, but it's likely coming.
Phil, let me ask you a question then. I'll answer your
Yes.
question. Do we have to celebrate Shabbat on the moon?
I'm sorry? Say again?
Celebrate, do we have the restrictions of Shabbat on the moon?
If we are alive on the moon, I think
So,
so.
so here's the reason. They have already made that decision. You know, yes, you're right. We haven't faced these issues yet, but to me, one of the most important parts of studying Jewish ethics is looking at these situations so that when they occur, we're not taken by surprise.
I think you misinterpret what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if we're ruling today that we should permit this today because it may be able to save somebody in 10 to 20 years, that's different from saying that if I'm on the moon today, I should celebrate Shabbat today. If I'm on the moon today and I take out an embryonic stem cell, I'm not going to be able to cure these diseases tomorrow or next week or next year. I can't tell you when, but it's not now. So I'm doing it solely to save the life. That's not saving the life now.
Well, Phil, I'm going to have to disagree with your disagreement with me.
Okay.
Because the bottom line is, from my perspective, that if we consider these issues now, we're not caught by surprise 20 years from now. We might be
Right.
So, but Debbie, before I call you, I know that you're all dying to know, but there is no Shabbat on the moon. That was the decision. Shabbat is earthbound.
However, well,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just, here in the land of the midnight sun. So,
Right.
So
Yeah, what do you do?
What do you do? What do you do during Shabbat when the sun sets at 11:23 and it rises?
Right. You don't go by the stars and the sun.
Right.
That was the decision that was made. You don't. So Debbie,
But we do use a lunar calendar.
and that's why we're called loonies. Debbie,
Thank you, Rabbi. A number of things that I wanted to address here. What's foremost in my mind, Phil, with stem cell, Hadassah Hospital has been using stem cells to save lives for many, many years. In 2018, I went to a conference in Washington, D.C. Kathy, I believe, was there too. And one of the focuses was about stem cells. And Hadassah Hospital has been doing research and therapy for many, many years. And a lot of the things that you're saying are future bound, they're now.
They can't, what you're saying is.
The
that they
adult stem
can't-
cells that they're using, they're not using embryonic stem cells, they're adult stem cells.
Right,
And
but
they're doing it.
You can't transform the genes yet. You can't cure the cancer with it. You can't change the disease
Phil,
part with
Phil
it.
and Debbie, that is, you're gonna have to
That's
take
not
the
true.
line because it's not part of the.
And I was there, I was at the Hadassah, I was a consultant.
Okay.
Uh,
Rabbi, I turned up my mic on again, only because I wanted to say, the one thing that we're losing perspective of is the 40 days.
Right, but the 40 days don't apply anymore. They did then, they don't now. So, yes, Phil, you have to unmute.
Sounds
Wait a
better
minute.
this way.
I have to unmute you. Hold on.
Hey.
Sorry. Okay, Phil. Phil,
I didn't.
I
say-
apologize for muting you, but you weren't listening. So I'm gonna give
No,
you a shot. Go for it.
No, I didn't say anything else, I don't think, unless you didn't hear everything I said. I didn't catch when I got muted.
Okay. All right. So I apologize for that. I was actually experimenting and you got in the way. So,
I see.
so the bottom line is that this was not acceptable. But the reason it wasn't acceptable was because it was categorically, the way in which the categories were determined at the very beginning determined how they were going to answer it. That by placing it into the issue of is reproduction acceptable when there's no intention for reproducing, and in addition with, is this the mitzvah of kibud av va'em, of honoring your parents? The answer to both of those was no, you can't do that. So next week, we will take up, it's Hanukkah. Do you want to meet?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I'm wrong. I was thinking about the Wednesday class. They're having the big thing at the
Wednesday class is not
It's
meeting.
not meeting.
The Wednesday class is not meeting next week.
No, that's gonna come out. It's
So,
not.
but if you want to, if, I'll tell you what, email me if you want to meet on Thursday. If we get enough people to meet, we'll meet. The next session that we meet on will deal with Nazi experimentation.
Good,
That was brought up.
Be able to do it. I may be able to do it.
good.
Can I read the last paragraph?
Go for it.
Professor David Brown, professor of Jewish law and ethics at Yeshiva University, said that from the vantage point of Jewish law, the issue is very complicated.
Yes, the issue is
Imagine that.
complicated. And
Imagine that.
to all, a good night.